Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, July 15th. And if you haven't paid your estimated taxes, now's the time. But that's just one of the nagging things about life these days, which is used to be a joke. People used to talk about taxes and death being the two things, that really get you down. But today it seems like we're dealing with a lot more in our midst that affects our day-to-day lives, that really is making a mess of it. And it's forcing people, we think, to examine how they're living and what their priorities are and how that is going to maybe be affected, maybe changed by the recent challenges. I think if anything else, the recent challenges are suggesting that things do need to change, or they will, with or without us. And so if you're in that situation, it's better to feel and be in somewhat of a state of control rather than be subject to the whims of others making decisions, some of which we can look at in the world, of course, as we know, and not really appreciate some of the decisions that are being made for us on our behalf. So this week we wanted to talk about lifestyle. And of course, COVID might be the complementary subject of that conversation, but we could talk about lifestyle at any time from the perspective of slow medicine, because essentially slow medicine is lifestyle. And when we use the phrase slow medicine, and medicine in particular to refer to the fact that we could be healthier, so we need some sort of medicine, it brings me back, in fact, the name of that book really came in part to me with an appreciation for the word medicine in the context of how Native Americans, indigenous people to the North America, referred to medicine. And it wasn't medicines as like herbs and supplements and a healer like a shaman or a doctor. It was a way of living. Their definition of medicine was a way of living. In fact, they talked about the road, the path, and there was a right road, is what they said. And the right road is a way of living that leads to all good things in life. Of course, that includes vitality and longevity. But it doesn't mean that though life remains challenging and there are losses, important losses around us, that we can't be successful even in the midst of that. So slow medicine and how we deal with our challenges of living, it can really be referred to as a way to address lifestyle. And so when we might pick up a subject like COVID, and the question is, well, how can I protect myself from an infectious disease? Or how can I share what I know and feel with others that I care about who might similarly be protected? Our focus is on, well, examine your lifestyle. Look at the things that go into how you live your life day to day and consider how you can improve that. Because to the extent that you can, that's the answer to your question. In the world today, when we're witnessing people who are getting sick and dying from COVID, some of whom are relatively young and look healthy, we're hearing in the news, we may even say ourselves, but he was so healthy. I want you to think about that statement. So somebody who just got a virus that some people are getting and not even symptomatic, but some people are getting the virus and are getting so sick that they're dying. Do you really believe that they were healthy? I mean, it doesn't make sense to actually conclude they were healthy, because almost by definition, that they got sick when many other people aren't, there was something not right or well about their systems that allowed that outcome. It really forces us to examine how we define health and what we think of as healthy. And the way people look, how strong they are, what their age is, while they're of some value, they're not the only determinants of health. And I think we just need to look deeper into ourselves. And that not only then includes deeper understanding of the physical makeup of our bodies, but the deeper look at the inside of our totality of life, which is our mind and our thoughts, the harmony between ourselves, other people, other life forms, the planet as a whole, the existential universe, our relationships that become an aspect of our lives that could be harmonious or disharmonious and could affect us, specifically affect our body. Maybe the final determinant of health may be reflected in what happens to our body to some extent, though I think that that's not necessarily true. But if we still want to focus on how our body is protected, we can't overlook the fact that our body has relationships with a lot of other things. And that when we even just want to look at our body, we have to be really smart about this, to ask more probing questions. What makes a person healthy? And I am frustrated as a physician to witness most of my colleagues, whether they're in the media or on their own platforms, talk about what I would say are superficial recommendations. Frankly, superficial recommendations. A mask is a superficial recommendation. It's not that it doesn't have some value, but it's not enough. We're seeing people, Robin and I were just listening to the news yesterday, where teachers in Arizona were sharing the fact that one of their colleagues, a 61-year-old woman who's a teacher, got COVID and died. And that school district that they were in took all the precautions. They were hyper vigilant. They wore masks. They were sanitizing. They were, not allowing too many people to gather. That means students as well as faculty. They were washing down the surfaces. They were wearing gloves. They did everything that was being told for them to do. They were maybe doing more than necessary, is what one of these women were saying. And yet her colleague got COVID and died. So though the masks and all that behavior are of some value, they're not enough. And so if we just wait, even if we followed those recommendations, we would still wind up being at some risk. Not to mention the consequences of being socially isolated. This phrase, social distancing, to me is a problem. We don't want to be socially distanced. We want to be socially connected. So isolation has consequences. So even if we call it physical distancing, that's still odd to not hug people, to not gather with friends and family. It's not conducive to good health. So I think some of the recommendations themselves are problematic. Wearing a mask is an emblem, something on your sleeve essentially that says, I am afraid. And when you put that mask on and you say, I'm afraid, so I'm protecting myself. I'm afraid for other people. I'm protecting other people. I understand that sounds altruistic. It sounds appropriate. But there's also a statement of fear at the same time. It's not that it's one or the other, it's both. So depending on how provoked you are by fear and anxiety, if your sympathetic nervous system responds to the fear concept, I'm afraid to go outside, so I'm going to wear gloves, I'm going to wash down every surface, I'm going to put on a mask, I'm afraid for my older family members, I'm afraid for my kids, I'm afraid. Your body is responding to fear. And when your body responds to fear, the sympathetic nervous system turns on, and that impairs your immune system. So the same behavior that may on some level protect you, because I'm not arguing that there might be some protection, but if the mindset is fear and that's dominant, then the result of the behavior may be the fear response, which is not good for your health. And that's not just COVID. COVID is here in our mind, on our minds and in our lives. But so has always been heart disease, strokes, cancer, diabetes. All those things are still also in our midst, and we have some risk. So, and other infections. So if we're impaired in some way because of our response to one thing, in totality, that's not the best advice. I always seek to give people the best advice, not just adequate, average advice. And what I think we're seeing, and what I'm disappointed in my colleagues, is that it's average advice. It's okay. It's not enough. It's just not enough. And so what we want to share with you is what is enough, what is more. And that's where I want you to dig deeper. First, learn about the physiology of what happens in this disease. It's not just simply an infection, any more than when we discuss Lyme disease, it's just simply an infection. It's an infection, maybe multiple infections, maybe toxic environments and toxicity that our body has accumulated over time, the world around us is, infiltrated by energies of people and pollution and problems of all sort. And so our single being is affected by all those things. And if we really want to be more immune, then we really have to think about addressing it all. You leave one important thing out of a cake, let's say the yeast, you're not going to get it to rise. It's just not going to happen. It's just a little thing. It's just like a pinch of bacteria, but it's not going to rise for you. So our lives are predicated on making sure we are addressing the number of different important variables that are pretty essential to what's going to go on. So you have to take it apart. You have to spend the time to do that. And therefore, you probably need some help. So Robin, I've done all this talking as I usually do.
Okay.
And I know that that's often a lot, but I was wondering what you have to add to that.
No. Well, I got distracted because I could see all our beautiful friends and my daughters just hopped on. So hello, everybody. I think the key word is connection. I know my daughter, Chelsea, who just popped on, is a nurse, and she's working really hard to protect people, and she has to protect herself with all the protective gear. And at the same time, she's being challenged. She lives alone, and I think this is something that we can talk about, connection. And for those of you who are alone, and how do you connect the dots to stay connected? I think connection is maybe the key to helping one be aware about maybe what is true, what is real right now. However, we know love is unconditional, and love will feed our cells and help us to be in that parasympathetic state. Correct? Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense, and I think that that's sort of a good example of one of those ingredients in the cake that we can't do well without. And so it troubles me when I'm hearing suggestions about behavior that we stay disconnected. I mean, that's one of the fundamental problems I have with these recommendations. Now, it doesn't mean it's one or the other, that we can get creative. We can stay connected and also properly distance. But I think what's so important is that your mind has to go along with it. And what I was sort of emphasizing was the fear component. So if we can't connect to anybody because we're afraid of touching everything, we're going to have problems. Not only are we going to be disconnected, but we have that fear. So can you address your fear enough to be connected? Because you can't live without connection, as you're saying. It's just not, you could even, it begs the question, well, why would I want to be alive if I wasn't connected to anybody? And now you could say, well, this is short term. I know a lot of the sarcasm in social media that I witness from people I'm connected to is, just do this. Military personnel, surgeons operate, nurses like our daughter Chelsea wears a mask all day long. That's normal. Why can't you wear a mask for 15 minutes in the store? There's some sort of sarcasm there. But there's also, I think, in fairness, another side to that, which is I want to be able to smile at people. And when I can't smile at people and I can't see that I'm smiling at people, I feel disconnected. It feels odd to me. And for some people, that's really a violent act against them. So the suggestion makes sense in some levels, but it's not, we have to be more considerate. I'm not sure that there's a single right answer for all people. But I think each of us, what I was saying is each of us has to have in our mind where we're comfortable. And we have to address the disconnect. We have to remain connected. So we have to address fear enough that we can feel comfortable being with some people. Otherwise, it'll be to our detriment. Part of what's impairing our immune systems and making us more susceptible to bad outcomes with COVID then is some of that energy. And it's vital that we think through this very carefully and we consider that. I also want to talk about something else. We don't know right now why some people who look healthy are maybe getting so sick. So again, as I was saying earlier, it has to presume that something about them was not healthy. What kind of things could those be? And so we think of environmental stuff like your toxins. We think about what you eat. It's really important. So this is time to shape up what you're eating, by the way. I just want to make it clear. Eat whole, natural foods. Stop with the processed foods, things in boxes, packages, cans. Really, this is a time to just do it. I don't even want to get into the details of anymore why. It's just not okay to eat food, or you can't assume you're eating good food that happen to be box packages and old and shipped all over the world to get to you. So think of fresh, local, seasonal, organic food. Just go there. Eat much more of that and stop with the stuff in boxes. Then what I would want you to do is to think about how else we sort of live our lives. There seems to be a relationship between vitamin D levels and people who get sick with COVID. There seems to be a relationship between air quality and people are getting COVID. So let's say you live in Los Angeles, and now we know that something's going on in Los Angeles, that despite all the efforts in California, there's something about Los Angeles County that seems to be defying what should happen. And of course, we thought that the summer months, the warm months, would protect people. We're not seeing that happen. Well, what other possibilities might there be? Well, to me, it raises the flag. Los Angeles is one of the most polluted air quality environments that we know of. Does that have something to do with it? Think about other people who are getting sick. People in nursing homes, people in institutions like prisons. Okay, maybe they're in confined quarters. Maybe the air quality in indoor spaces isn't so good. Maybe it's not just how much they're getting exposed to. Maybe it's something to do with air quality. Maybe it's something to do with that those institutional populations have been getting flu vaccines every year for the last X number of years. That maybe there's something problematic about how vaccines could impair the immune system. We have to open these questions again. I know there are a lot of people, I have good friends, who really can't stand the anti-vaccination talk. But would we be appropriate? Would I, as a physician, be honest if I didn't say that we have to examine everything right now? Why would we put anything off the table? Why would we have some sort of philosophy that prevented us from looking objectively at anything? And so I wonder, is there something about impaired immune responses from medications or vaccination and the way people live their lives? So to me, getting vaccinated every year for the flu is a lifestyle choice, because I'm choosing to live in fear, worried about the flu because I'll get pneumonia or I'll give it to somebody else, and as opposed to focusing on what I'm eating, my environment, my healthy relationships, and really maybe going to somebody who can help me really double check whether or not my body is truly clean. Am I truly healthy? I think I'm healthy, I look good, whatever, but am I really getting enough analysis? And here I would say Western medicine is not sufficient. The routine blood work, as an example, that people get, my liver function, my kidney function, my blood counts are normal, is very rudimentary. I've seen people hours before death with normal blood counts and normal liver function and normal kidney function. That does not mean that those things prove beyond any doubt that there's something else going on. We can't easily assess the immune system by looking at white blood counts or how many subset white blood cells there are. We have to understand that there's something more to our physiology, and there are answers to these things now if you look for them. Not necessarily part of mainstream medicine. Although functional medicine is getting closer to that, where there's a lot more sophistication in the blood work. But there's other analysis, like what Robin and I are learning with regard to quantum physics and how that can be applied to assess energy and energy fields in the body, something that one day I'd like to share more about. It's an involved subject, but it leads to the point, which is, if you really want to know if you're healthy, you've got to go to somebody who can really answer these questions. And that's on the physical level. If you really want to know if you're healthy, you need to go speak to somebody like Robin about your mental emotional state. What would you say about that?
Oh, necessary for all of us.
Well, how would you assess somebody? Somebody comes into you, they say, well, I'm fine. I don't have anything wrong with me.
Okay, wait, stop right there. So that was the first thing we were taught at my Helix training, which is psychological training, is when somebody says I'm fine, you know that there's definitely lots to slowly uncover. And I think back to the connection piece. So I think it's about feeling connected to another human being. And I'm just going to share a brief story because yesterday I went to the dentist, and most of you going into a doctor's office or the dentist may feel yourself moving into that sympathetic nervous system state. The difference, I was just telling my children this morning that this particular practice, I could still feel it a little bit because the way I feel treated when I walk into that office, people are kind and they remembered that I had a beautiful grandson and they asked me how he was doing. It was just so beautiful. And so what I took away from that is very much about what you're saying, is when someone feels secure in their environment or connected to, seen, acknowledged, we actually can move our energetic system into that parasympathetic state, right? So I think that's like most important.
So but I do want you to answer
Yeah.
a question. So people may not know how to assess how they're doing mentally, emotionally. That's sort of my point. Just like people can't assess how they're doing physically, which was what I was saying previously. So if somebody does want to get a good checkup, mentally, emotional, a good checkup, and then they came to you and said, look, I don't have anything that I'm aware of is bothering me, but I do want to look underneath the hood here.
Right.
How would you start that process?
Well, already they've started the process by being curious, and that's really the first step for all of you. Just be curious to wanting to understand these components of which we call the self, is your emotional relationship, how you relate, how you feel, how do you react to life situations. So my process is very gentle. So already when somebody comes to me, we are already halfway there. And then we continue to be curious about what one might be experiencing, whether it's, in their work, personal, and most people don't end up coming into, maybe you can answer this too, until with their health. This is why Michael and I are different. People come, they're a little more aware about, or have the wisdom to know that they can actually do something to create change. When we go down the Western road, it's more people come, we go to the hospital when we're sort of broken, right? So I think that's something really important that we need to highlight.
Just think about how you take care of your car. Every year you get a reminder from the auto body shop or, the mechanic, come in, get checked out. In fact, in most states, there's a requirement that you get some basic stuff done to evaluate your car to even get, sort of the state, inspection. Our body, mind, spirit complex, our lives essentially, don't necessarily get put through that routine checkup unless something obviously blows up. Now that makes sense, obviously, to be attended to at that time, but wouldn't it make more sense to try to think about it as a prevention and an intervention, if necessary, before it gets to the point where it's symptomatic? And so this is why I think we are a good partnership in that regard, because there's the physical and the mental, emotional, and of course what's between those two things, especially the way we live our lives and share our world here at Sunraven, is the spiritual quality of existence, which is, there's a reason we want to be healthy. There's a reason we want good relationships. We want to thrive in our state of being right now. We want to make the most of this life. We don't just want to survive and say, count 99 candles one day, but we want to be able to sort of feel blessed every day with something of quality in our lives. It's qualitative. It's not necessarily so quantitative. And so when you could feel good about yourself, when you've covered the bases, when your body's working well enough, your mind, emotional state is working well enough, and then part of that is what Robin was sharing, is that so you address some of the things like fear that might naturally be triggered at times like this, and you have a better way of addressing it because you're in better shape. Well, then you live your life in that parasympathetic state of balance, and then whatever is thrown at you, you do better with. And you have more capacity to do more. This, in the end, takes some work. This is not something, you bring your car in to get service, you have to live without it for a day or two. Well, this is sort of the point, which is you've got to invest in this. This doesn't happen naturally. Unfortunately, our educational system doesn't really include much about health. Our socio-political establishment doesn't really emphasize this type of health. In fact, I was sharing my frustration, which is that what I'm hearing people talk about is the superficial stuff, which again is okay, but it's not enough. So
It's a health plan.
yeah,
You
so
know,
part of your
truly
health,
planning.
yeah. So part of your health plan is to address your lifestyle. Take an inventory. The Slow Medicine book itself has 77 questions in it. That's designed to be an inventory for you to take that gives you questions around all sorts of subjects, not typical doctor questions. That say, how am I living my life? How do I feel about this? Do I feel close to my parents? Do I move my bowels every day? Do I play with kids? Do I live in joy? These are all questions, and you're going to answer them. And it's going to give you some basis to then answer the question, which is how am I doing overall? And then see where there may be opportunities for you to do better. With that as a blueprint and a model, then you may be able to do a lot of that stuff on your own. And then where it becomes apparent that maybe you can use some help, understanding your physical, emotional, spiritual questions and maybe where it's not coming so easy to you. And to be double check that don't have a blind spot, and that you're not just simply following the advice of people who are on platforms right now that are giving you simple, quick answers, often, sort of contributing to the agenda of other people with other ideas for populations, humanity, and more generally, the environment, their own for-profit interests or political interests or power, whatever it is. Do you really want to take advice from those people primarily? Listen carefully. Think about what they say, for sure. It's not all bad. But there's more to it. There's just more to it. So that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this weekly show. And so, in conclusion, we want to...
Can I add one thing? I'm thinking about your home. Your body is your home. And cleaning out your home. And planning to keep your home. Many of us feel like, we're going to clean up our house. We've been doing a lot of inside cleaning up. So if we think about the environment that we house our spirit, truly using this as a metaphor about taking care of your home is the most important.
Yeah, I think that's look at it that way. There's nothing more precious than your inner being, and your body is housing that being. And these two things become what you are and what you're going to share in the world in all that light. And so that's the message. There's more to say about it. There's more to do. There's a way we can maybe support you. Of course, listening to us again next week, writing to us, sharing with us any of the ideas you have for more other topics that we may talk about, calling us if you think we can help you personally. Our website is slowmedicine.org. What else did I forget about contacting us?
I think you hit it all.
Okay.
We're just so happy that we can connect with all of you, and I see so many beautiful people on today. So my heart goes out to all of you. Love you all. I think love is something that goes into loving your house and reaching out if you need support. I think that is the key message today.
Yeah.
Which can help us move into change, which is this new way of being now, the way we're all being called to live our lives now, and what's most important to you in your heart. And that's our message for today. Thank you for all being here with us, and hope to hear from you soon or see some of you. Come visit us here at Sunraven, even if you just need to take a walk in the garden. Yeah.
Be around friends that you trust, that you're comfortable with. Don't forget how important that is, and maybe get past your fear a little bit to reconnect if you need to.
Okay.
That's our message. Anyway, so thank you again for joining us. Have a great week. Hope we all have a great week, and hopefully we move in the right direction soon. Take it easy.
Bye.